All right, it looks like we are live. So, hello and welcome to another. We should come up with like a cool name, but just another Q&A
Yeah,
with Brian and Molly.
yeah, no, that works.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're right. Every time we get the band back together, we should have
yeah.
like some sort of.
So, I obviously am Molly, and this is Brian, and I will let you go first. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and who you are.
Hi, I'm Brian. I am your friendly neighborhood engineer with OCD, with bonus ADHD and anxiety, depression, all the good stuff that comes with it. I started with an OCD back in, I believe, February. Molly was my peer advisor. Well, still is my peer advisor, I should say. And it was at a time when I was really struggling with compulsions. I've had OCD all my life. I just was never diagnosed. And it was something that had been getting worse the more I was alone in my head, away from people as the pandemic went on. I didn't realize that how much worse it was getting until I found myself checking, rechecking. And more it was delaying my day or just delaying life in general. And it was getting in the way. And I decided to reach out and make the call. After a lot of the symptoms, I started tuning into some of these live webinars at first, and then looking through the app, and then decided to make the call because why not? It's free. And I am still in the maintenance phase. I'm actually got an appointment next week, actually, about a week today. And it's something, OCD is real. It's something we don't talk about. We never talked about it as a kid. I have relatives that have it, along with the ADHD as well. So we got a fun mix in my family. But it's something I encourage you, if you're struggling or you think you may have it and you're doubting whether you have it, which is what it does, just make the call and try to seek out. It's never harms and never too late to go ask to see if you have it, and you just take it from there. So turn over to Molly.
Yeah, I love it. So I obviously also have OCD. I work as a peer advisor for NoCD or at NoCD. So if you, like Brian, think you might have OCD, give us a call and you'll get matched up with one of either myself or one of my teammates who all have OCD and have gone through an OCD's therapy. So that is what a peer advisor is. I, as well, was always an anxious child, teenager, adult. I don't know if I am even still an adult, but I've been struggling with OCD for as long as I can remember, and anxiety and social anxiety specifically for myself. And I have obviously gone through therapy with NoCD, which is ERP, exposure and response prevention. I could talk about OCD all day, every day. I do actually do that pretty much for my job. And I love it. And I love connecting with other people who also have OCD. So I will go ahead and get started. I see we have a lot of questions already. So, which is awesome. It's so cool to have people that are curious about things. So Katie says, how to handle obsessions about consent. I have never had a partner tell me I pressured them, but my brain is telling me I did. Yes, your brain will tell you lots of things that may or may not be true. Like Brian said, it is called the doubting disorder, and whether or not you've done things doesn't really matter to your brain. It wants you to not believe what it's telling you, which can be really challenging, especially when it is about something that is so, can be so serious, like consent.
Yeah, well, I was going to say it's the typical. It's like you said, it wants black and white. It wants you to worry, because the more you worry, the more you feed it, the more it's going to grow, the more it's going to keep attacking other parts of your life. And like we always say, I mean, if you have those thoughts, I mean, you're not your thoughts. So if your thoughts are telling you, well, maybe I did this, maybe you didn't, you have to accept and acknowledge the uncertainty, but don't dwell on it. I'd say the main thing is don't keep thinking about it over and over again. And don't, if you're trying to prove to yourself that you haven't done it, then you're kind of reassuring. As odd as it sounds, seeking reassurance feeds it more, because it's paying mind to it. And like I said, it doesn't mean just because you've had those thoughts in your head doesn't mean that they've happened. It wants you to doubt. It wants you to doubt yourself, and it wants you to attack whenever you're feeling like you could be the best person you've always been and never done anything wrong, OCD is going to find a way to make you doubt whether you're good or whether you've done something right. And it'll come up with things that you never would have thought about, like things you would never do in real life, but it'll make you think, well, maybe I have done that. Maybe I've done that. Maybe I would swerve the car to do this, or maybe I would do X or Y. Man, there's thoughts you've never had before. I would say that the obsessions, like the thoughts, you're not your obsessions. It's a thought in your head. Is much as a cop out as it sounds, just try to let it go. It's not ruining your life. The more you think about it, the more you're going to concentrate on it, the more it's going to get worse for you. And the OCD is going to latch onto it more. And it's just going to keep feeding away and sucking from your life and your happy thoughts and try to go after it.
Yeah. And I think it's a really good point to remember that the thoughts themselves, which I feel like we say this every time, and every ERP therapist says this, I'm sure too, the thoughts are not the problem. So Kate, it sounds like you are having thoughts about whether or not you have been, received consent, given consent, that the thought of that is not actually the problem. It's the rumination, it's the reassurance, it's the obsessions, and the compulsions that come after that is really the problem, which is kind of what Brian was saying, that it's, that's what's taking up your time, not the thought itself. I know it's so much easier to say, as an outsider saying that, and as somebody who's gone through therapy, to say that it's, because it's not that easy, of course, but it is, kind of catching that thought when it happens, recognizing that the thought isn't the problem. It's the way you're handling the thought. How to manage OCD at school. I wish that I had known about OCD when I was in school, because I really struggled in school. I had no idea it was OCD. I was like, Brian, when you talk about checking, I remember spending so much energy checking things, counting, when I would take, what are they called? Multiple choice tests. Instead of like actually taking the test, I would be counting how many of each letter I chose. And then the test is over and it's like, oh, I actually didn't even finish the test because I was so stuck in my head. So I think reaching out is a huge part, getting a diagnosis, recognizing that it is OCD is a really big step in itself, a step I wish I had been able to take at the time. If you're at college, there is probably some kind of counseling on campus. If you are younger than that, there is guidance counselors, there are teachers that you can trust, that you can talk to about what you're going through.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Molly. I wish I knew what it was at school. Since I have a lot of the just right, I would find myself, I could get done with a test early, and I would actually try to rush to get through because I know I'd have to, I'm going to recheck it at least until I could have an hour left, and I would be checking it up until that hour was done just to make sure you sure it's right. And I keep doubting every single answer. Well, maybe I read that wrong, or maybe this, and it just took up so much. And then you get anxiety on top of it because I start worrying like, okay, now that's not right, or maybe I have too many of letter A or too many letter B, like, but hold on, this doesn't look right because there's too many in this column. Am I doing this wrong? And they trying to trick me, and I start doubting all of it, and it would get in the way of I might change answers at the end because I didn't have enough of the C letter. I knew it would have been B, but I'm like, no, there's no way it would have been. That's too many. And then I end up getting it wrong, even though I had it right the first time. Or I keep going back and forth, switching between it. And at the end, I ended up wasting so much time, I might not finish the test sometimes. Especially when it was answered where you had to do like word problems or something where it's just free form writing and you don't have the answer in front of you. Sometimes I wouldn't get through all of it because I would just be doubting it constantly, or something didn't seem, it's a big thing for me. If it doesn't seem just right, I can't move on. Like I get stuck. And the big thing is just once you get the diagnosis, once you know what it is and give it a name, it's a huge relief. And then you start paying attention to what's causing it, and you can start to try to mitigate it or try to help limit it as much as you can, because you recognize everything that's happening. And you may recognize other compulsions you had you never realized before, but once you realize you have OCD or been diagnosed, then you can start going, oh, wait a minute, that's why I do this. And then you can start trying to help lessen the effects and try to take more of your time and your life back. I'd say the big thing, how to manage it, is try to get a diagnosis first, and try ERP is a huge help. I mean, that's the way to really get at it, is ERP. And then you can do a lot of ERP at home once you recognize what you have, and your therapist tells you, you can keep practicing it. And it's something you're always going to have to practice. I'd say getting the diagnosis first and taking that first step is the huge thing. And then you can start chipping away at everything else.
Yeah. I mean, I've never, of all the people that I speak to, I've never heard someone say that they wish they had gotten diagnosed later. You know, everyone, the earlier you can get diagnosed, the better. I think that, you know, that's it. There's such a misunderstanding of what OCD is, and people don't reach out for help because of that, which is why we love doing these kinds of lives and talking about what, you know, how it actually impacts our lives. I know a lot of schools as well are able to do like accommodations for people, so you get a little bit extra time on tests, or you take a test in your own room, or things like that, so that you can, you know, really focus on the test and not have the OCD kind of being, you know, as loud as it can be.
Yeah.
But I think as well, Connie, just knowing that you're not alone is huge in itself, and you're, you know, far from alone for sure. So Chris is newly diagnosed, which is very exciting. I know, and I don't mean to, I feel like that diminishes the scariness, and I don't mean to, it is very scary. That's, you know, I don't mean to take away from that. But it is also exciting to get a diagnosis and start treatment and be able to recognize that there's a name for what you're experiencing, that there's this whole world of people who also experience this. I feel like I am going crazy and losing my mind. Have you experienced this?
I will say personally, yeah. I mean, when I first, excuse me, need the caffeine. When I, as Molly knows all too well, when I first got diagnosed, it was a relief, but at the same time, then I started going down the rabbit hole of, well, what else? Is this a sign of this kind of OCD, like relationship OCD, or this kind of OCD? Like, you start going too much down those holes of trying to diagnose yourself. And at the time, the anxiety was really peaking through the roof too, which helped exasperate the OCD, which would feed the depression, which would feed the ADHD thrown in there. It's like a big cauldron of, you know, mental swirls going on. Yeah, it was like a blizzard in my head, one of the ice cream blizzards. But it's the fact that you're, especially before you even try to do ERP, the OCD, once you recognize it, I almost feel like it's much like when we start doing ERP and you do the whack-a-mole where you push one down and another kind of OCD can pop up. It's like when you first give it a name and know, like, oh, so that's what's been bothering me. It kind of lashes out, or mine did, and try to look for other things of, well, maybe you got this instead, the doubting, or maybe you're just like, your anxiety is assigned to this, or maybe you have like split personality or this or that, and it starts grasping at things that tell you don't have OCD, you have something else, anything, so you don't try to get over me. So yeah, it's a real thing, especially if you have anxiety or anything like I do as well. It tends to act up, and it's going to try to act out to try to make you doubt, and to try to make you not try to try to ignore it. Like, it doesn't want you to ignore it. It's like, I'm here, but it's not here as your friend. It's here to make you anxious and nervous and upset, and that's what feeds it. But it wants you to think it's your friend, but it's not. It steals your candy. You don't want if that makes any sense.
And I think it's pretty common as well to, especially being newly diagnosed, to think that you're losing your mind. I mean, you know, I've heard people describe it as their mind broke, or their brain broke. I remember when I was really little, before I knew anything about OCD, I used to say, like, I would wish I could trade my brain in for a new one. I wish I could get, you know, one that didn't work like this, because mine's not working the right way, or the way that I want it to. So that's definitely common with people, you know, and people with OCD. And I am excited that you are diagnosed, that you can start treatment.
Congratulations.
That diagnosis. And then the follow-up questions that they asked, I don't know if you mean counselors, like therapists that are LGBT friendly. If you do, if that's what you mean, yes, we absolutely do. If you have already started with a therapist, just let them know that you would prefer working with somebody who is more LGBT affirming. That is, absolutely, you should be working with somebody who you feel safe and comfortable with for whatever reason. And, whatever type of person that you want to work with, you absolutely just let them know. And then as far as peer advisors go as well, I'd love to be your peer advisor if you are working with no CD. And yeah, just let them know, be honest with who you speak to.
Yeah. One thing I will say, make sure you have to trust and be comfortable with your therapist, because if you don't trust them to tell them everything and be open and honest, you'll never get to the root problem or never get to all the subtypes and everything, because you're holding back, and that's the only way they can help you. And if you don't feel comfortable with whoever you're with, then you should let them know and try to get with someone else, because that's huge. If they don't understand you or you can't feel like you can relate, then you'll never really get at getting the help you need.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's really important to recognize, like, you're a whole person, so your OCD might be a part of you, some other identity, part of the LGBTQI plus identity might be a part of you. And that all matters. It all, feeds into this one person. So yeah, like you said, just be open with your therapist for sure. I love that. Oh, wow. So many comments. Okay, let's see. Okay, so this person has asked about, it sounds like religious scrupulosity. I actually did something religiously wrong. Now I feel maybe I won't get my careeristic dream due to this. This is putting me down so that I can't keep up with ERP. I'm feeling this is not my obsession and OCD. I am desperately seeking a ritual that can neutralize my sin. First thing I would say, if your mind ever goes to maybe this isn't my OCD, it probably is. And again, as outsiders, Brian and I have no idea your situation and what you're going through. But I have been there, absolutely, where you think, well, this one time it's different. This one, obsession is something outside of my OCD and I need to solve, or I need to fix, or I need to resolve. And it's always been the OCD. At least that's my experience.
Yeah. And I will say, the fact that you're definitely seeking the ritual or compulsion, to me, makes it seem like that is OCD. If you're seeking that, there's nothing that can there's no purple unicorn that can make everything all right. No magic cupcake. You got to get to the root of the problem that's causing you the anxiety. And like you said, if typical OCD, if you think you did something, was it really that bad, or what? Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but is it really going to, you don't know whether if you're talking about like priesthood or something, that may be getting in the way, and you think, this is it. I can't pursue it. I'm just, guesstimating here. I'm not sure exactly your situation, but if it's something like that, again, I would say it sounds like your OCD. You're looking for one thing. You can't stop thinking about it, and you're looking for one thing to take that away. I would say it probably is your OCD, and it wants you to think about that. It wants you to ruminate on it, and wants you to not move on and make it so it takes up more of your time. And just my opinion, for my 2 cents and gum wrapper worth of knowledge, I would say it is. To me, it sounds like it's OCD. It's your OCD, especially if you have been diagnosed with OCD. I'm going to say it probably is, because when you're doubting it, the more you doubt that it is OCD, more than likely it is the OCD.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to recognize that OCD latches onto the things that we value and that we care about. So when people say, my OCD has latched onto my children or my relationship, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And in this case, it sounds like you obviously value your religion and your future in your religion. And that's really important to you and that, that matters to you. And because of that, your OCD is like, hey, I know this thing matters to you. I'm going to try to ruin it in every way that I can. And again, it is, I'm not trying to reassure you, but it probably is your OCD latching on to that mistake that you think you made. That is because of your OCD. And it's, again, as outsiders, we're not clinicians, so this is not anything official, but it sounds like that's, the next thing that your OCD has moved on to. And tomorrow it might be something else. That is the fun of having OCD.
Well, and like Mollie was saying, the more you care about something, the more it's going to latch onto it because it knows you can't just let it go, because that's going to irritate you and upset you more. So you're going to think about it more, and you're just going to cause a monster to grow. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So this person is looking for some advice on how to tell their girlfriend about the disorder, that she shouldn't take anything I say personally, or that's me. Especially I have ROCD, so relationship OCD, and it's being so mean to my girlfriend. It's killing me, making me depressed.
Well, I mean, I will say I have, one of the many subtypes. It seems like there's no real just one OCD. I may have mainly just right, but I definitely have some the ROCD as well, and add that to the fact that the keeping emotions in check with the ADHD is a struggle in itself. Just telling my girlfriend what I had, it's not easy, but I had to. I'm like, listen, I was up front, like, listen, I have issues. I mean, she was here the first live stream I did with Mollie. She was sitting in the background off thing because I was so nervous to do it. But it's being honest and telling them, and it's going to be hard to try to tell them because a lot of people don't understand, but they don't understand that OCD is more than just washing your hands all the time. I feel like most people don't get it. And she was very supportive and still is. And she knows that, I'm on besides therapy and medication for both of all of the above fun times that I have. It's going to upset you because some things you're doing or ruminating on, you're questioning stuff, and mine will peak every once in a while too. And I have to be like, I'm to the point now that I can recognize it. Sometimes, when I get stressed out or something will trigger it and those backdoor spike up, and it'll get worse. And I don't want it to. It just is. And I try to recognize it and try to all right, stop. Like, I know this is you trying to get at me, OCD, and that's not the way it is. And it is or it isn't. My thoughts that I'm having, I try to just let them go in and out. And but telling her that that's the way your mind is working and making her, it'll help you in the long run because she'll understand where you're coming from and why you may have thoughts or you may say or act the way you are. It's your brain works. Our brains just work different. And not everyone gets it, but once they understand, it'll help her maybe not take personally or not. Like, she'll say, oh, I know that's why this is happening. And I think it's going to be hard to approach the subject with her. It's easier said than done. Like, trust me, I was nervous as hell to say it. But you have to do it. And it's part of being honest with your partner, is just being like, hey, this is the way it is. And it's a relief after you get through it. And your OCD is going to say, well, maybe she didn't believe you, or maybe this didn't happen. And it's going to try to bite back at you. But I would say just start little by little, trying to tell her about it, or try to explain what it is first, even to help her to understand what that means. Because most people don't even know what ROCD is. They think it's like Rage Against the Machine or something. They don't know what is a band. Like, what is ROCD? It's like, wait, you have to explain that to people, and having her understand in the long run, like I said, it'll help you because you'll feel more at ease. And even when you get those spikes, she'll be able to help you calm down. She'll be like, I know why this is happening, and it'll hurt you less because you won't feel like you're hurting her, because she'll understand where you're coming from. If my rambling makes any sense.
Yeah. And I think having outside resources can be really helpful, because I know how difficult it is to be like, hey, I'm dealing with this thing. Here's how it impacts me. Here's how it might impact us in future. But to say, here's other people talking about it. Here are articles. Here's a podcast. Here are blogs. I think can be really helpful. I know that's what I did when I started talking to my partner about it, and being, and just family members and friends, and just being more open is, saying that you're experiencing OCD and here's how it impacts you is one thing. And that's hard. That's really hard to think. I know, like, when you're kind of put on the spot, it can be really difficult to be like, here's what OCD looks like in my day, like that's hard. But hearing Dr. McGrath talk about it, or a therapist explain it, can be a way to kind of approach that topic, I think, a little bit more easily than just yourself. Maybe bring them to a therapy session if you're in therapy, and have the therapist kind of explain it a little bit about, what OCD is. Here's how it looks. That would be my 2 cents in a, what'd you say, 2 cents in a gum wrapper?
Yeah. Well, you could, or even just have her tune into one of the webinars or something. Just, I mean, that's a good resource to find out about the different types, and to show that there's other people having the same questions or going through the same things. I mean, that's one of the things I really like about the webinars, is because you realize that whatever kind of OCD you've had, or whatever thoughts you've had, someone else has had them. Like, that's just the way it is, or very similar.
And then there are also, through NoCD, there are support groups. And I know some of them are geared specifically for loved ones of people who have OCD. And that might be, if your girlfriend doesn't have OCD, that might be something that she wants to attend, just to hear, to connect with other people whose significant others also have OCD. Because it can probably feel really isolating to not really understand what your partner is going through. So that might be an option too, just, for her to be able to connect with others. Oh, I love this question. Is there a way to tell a difference between, I love all the questions. Is there a way to tell a difference between an obsession and a real problem?
Well, I was going to say they both seem real to you, which is the hard part. Because if they didn't cause you, if they didn't seem real, then they wouldn't be an issue. Then you wouldn't be obsessing over them, because you could just let go and say, well, that's ridiculous. I don't feel that way at all. I guess to me, it's if I can link it. Well, the thing is, you're never going to know. With OCD, it's tough to know the real, like some false memories too. Like, it's tough to know what's the real one. I've had ones where I swear I've gone over things to make them perfect in my head and stuff. I've had conversations with my friends. I haven't actually said those words. I'm like, have I told you this before? Because I swear. And they're like, nope, I don't know what you're talking about. I would say one of the things is, if you can find a root cause, not to reassure it, but if you can trace back to what's the causes of it, then maybe you can say. But I think it's going to be tough if it's a good obsession, not a good obsession, but the true obsession, it's going to be tough to tell the difference between them. But part of the thing with OCD is accepting, okay, maybe it did happen or maybe it didn't. But what does that really, how is that really going to impact me if I keep obsessing on something that happens? Like, if you're obsessing on something that happened in the past, unless you have a time machine, which if you do, let me know, you can't go back and change it. Or obsessing on something in the future or worrying about it, it's not going to change it either. So it's more of, and I always feel like it's a cop-out saying this, but accepting maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but can you keep going on, just live your life and not focus on it? Because the more you focus on it, the more it's going to get in the way of just enjoying life and doing family, friends, loved ones, and all that stuff.
I feel like that was a very therapist answer. That's what a therapist would say, but it's true. It is very true. I think as well, like in the moment, if there's a sense of urgency, I think that is a good way to tell if something is an obsession or if it's just a real life problem. Because the thing with OCD is it wants you to figure this out right now. So if if you are ruminating, if you're trying to reassure and you need to kind of come to a conclusion immediately, it's probably an obsession. That's kind of been my go-to. If it feels like I can worry about this in 5 minutes, then that is probably just a problem, a real problem. That can obviously turn into a compulsion in itself, is trying to figure that out. But I think that sense of urgency, that sense of like, I need to know this answer right now, can kind of differentiate between an obsession and a problem. But Brian, like you were saying, OCD feels so real. That's why it's a disorder. If it didn't give us distress, it wouldn't be a disorder.
I wish I could tell the difference. It'd be like, oh, my hand didn't tingle, so obviously it's not OCD.
Right. Yeah, it's hard. I think as well, something my therapist worked with me on is, if other people would be worrying about this, it's probably just a real problem. And again, that can lead you down a rabbit hole in itself. But if you're trying to solve something and you think that the person sitting next to you on the train has probably never tried to solve this, then it's probably an obsession, because OCD is very specific to you and what you're experiencing. And so that's been kind of my go-to sometimes too, is like, I'll think like, do other people have this problem? And if not, then that kind of answers that it's an obsession. That's always, not always the case, and not always something that we can even figure out, but it's not easy.
I'll remember that, and then I'll be thinking of what would Mollie think in this situation.
And I think that can be helpful sometimes, even to like bring up with people that that don't have OCD, and ask them just point blank, have you ever had this concern? And if they're like, no, why would that worry me? That kind of answers your question. Again, that can turn into a compulsion, getting reassurance like that. But I think that can be a way to tell. That's, no surefire way.
Well, and that's one of the fun things with OCD, is that anything you do to try to disprove it can turn into to a compulsion in itself. So
absolutely, yes. And I love the fun part about OCD. Yes. Let's see. Okay, so one of the support groups as well is specifically for LGBTQ plus community, people who have OCD, which that's amazing. I didn't know there was one specifically. I do know there are, so many different types. I'm trying to think about words, like different groups of people. There's parents, support groups for parents whose kids have OCD. There's support groups for teens with OCD. So I love that. I think support groups can be such a good way to just talk, just to talk to other people, just to connect with others. OCD is such an isolating disorder a lot of times.
Yeah, I've noticed that it seems like they keep adding more groups for the support ones. And I did one the one time randomly. I did one of the hardcore ones just to go on. And it was another thing. It was just nice to just talk to have other people to just interact with and talk with, and just be able to tell stories of what you've gone through and relate to them. So yeah, the support groups are always good. No matter if you find one local, find one in OCD, where you're gonna find it. I think it's good. Just see you don't feel like you're alone in what you have, and it just helps one another, especially the way it's been, the last few years, the way it has been, just getting to see people, even if it's just through the screen, that someone can relate, I think is really good and really therapeutic.
Absolutely. I agree. Does OCD OCD cause ups and downs, like mood swings, intrusive thoughts, and then relief from intrusive thoughts?
Yeah, it's always whoop, ups and downs. There's always ebbs and flows with OCD. So yes, it'll go up and down. Your anxiety will do the same. Depression do the same. Yeah. There'll be some days where it won't seem that bad at all, and other days it'll spike hard and spike in different ways you didn't even think possible. So yeah, it depends on what's going on in your environment you're in, what kind of stressors are happening, how you're feeling. If you're sick or something, that could do it. I know one is if you're tired. When I've been extremely tired, that's a big one that really spikes the OCD hard. I didn't realize that until I was exhausted from a trip one time. And yeah, it definitely does. So yeah, I would say yes, it does cause up and downs. Yeah. It keeps you guessing.
Yeah. This past weekend I went to what was it called? Oh, it's called King's Dominion. It's a amusement park around here. And I've been trying since then. I've been trying to think of some analogy to compare OCD to a roller coaster, and I haven't thought of it yet, but like a roller coaster, OCD goes up and down. It goes in loops. You never know what's coming next. And I think that is, there's so much to be said there, because you can't guess what's happening next. And that's part of OCD, is it's, you can be having the best vacation of your life, or your wedding day, or the birth of your child, something that's this, magical day. And OCD can be there, and it can come along for the ride. And that's something that you need to keep in mind, I think, is that you can't ruminate or reassure yourself out of OCD. It's going to be there, and whether or not you do something about it is up to you, of course, but you can't, hope for the best and just have it not show up one day. I mean, it's got a mind of its own.
Yeah, it likes to just latch on to stuff out of the blue. That's what it does. Yes. And it likes doing that, and it does it well sometimes.
Absolutely. The other day I had this, for some reason, I just had this, like, I guess it was real event OCD. It just latched onto this conversation that I had with my nephew. And it was like months ago, such a mundane conversation about dogs. Like, it was nothing important. And my OCD was like, well, what if of course the what ifs were there. And I was like, where did this come from? Why am I obsessing about this? And at the moment, it's like, I need to solve this. I need to figure out why I'm having this memory. I did something wrong. I said something inappropriate. I did something inappropriate. Of course, maybe I did. And I can't know. I can't obsess my way out of that. But yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, like you said, pick up on stuff that happened in the past out of the blue. Yeah. And it would be something. I've had it do that too. And I'm like, that was just a fleeting incident that had nothing to do with anything. Yep. But then the more I think about it, the more I sit down and wait, did that happen that way, or did it happen this way? And it starts getting worse. It's like, just stop it.
Yeah, absolutely. How to deal with the extreme regret, sadness, and emotional pain for doing a compulsion? Is that part of OCD?
Yeah, the compulsions help at the time being, and then they just make it worse. And then the more you fall back into doing it, you'll never do. It's always one more. Sometimes you'll have to do something 5 times, 10 times, 100 times. You never know, or they'll get worse. You might have to add steps to whatever you're doing. And if it's weird, like you said, it causes you distress knowing, like, why did I give into that? Because I would constantly be like, darn it, like, why did I do? I knew better. Once I started realizing what it was, I was like, I can't believe I wasted all that time doing that. That made no sense. Like I said, even like little things of when my daughter would point out, like, what are you doing? Like, oh, great. Now I see this. Like, I feel like, why? Like, what is wrong with me? Like, why can't I just let this go? And then it would be times like when I've had, like I said before, loved ones that would make fun of me point blank about stuff that I was doing because they didn't understand. And then you feel even worse about it. She's like, oh, great. Now I'm just broke. This is just, my brain can't handle life. And this is what it makes me do. I say, yeah, it's part of OCD because, I mean, it spikes up your anxiety, but it wants you to not feel comfortable. And the compulsion gives you that little temporary relief that gets worse over time and just makes it worse. But it's not a good, it doesn't really relieve because you'll regret doing it later more and more. So yeah, I'd say that is part of OCD. That's what it does.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I heard because we love analogies. I heard the analogy once that a compulsion is like like scratching a bug bite. So if you have a bug bite and you scratch it, it feels better. It gets rid of that itch for the moment. But then it might leave a scar on your leg or make you itch even more down the road. And it doesn't actually solve the problem. It just, it's a temporary fix. Sure, it makes you feel better for right now, but it always comes back with a vengeance. It never goes away. And I think that is what a compulsion can do. It fixes the problem for right now, and then it comes right back. I think that's absolutely a part of having OCD is that regret. I know regret over the things you've missed out on because of your OCD,
Yeah.
and regret for giving into the compulsion. What I would say is, for how to deal with it, is to have some compassion for yourself. You have a mental illness, and that is a part of you. That's not something you can control or change. That mental illness is there. And this is advice I'm giving myself too, because it's hard. There's no way to sugarcoat that having OCD is hard. It is very challenging, but you are human. So that means you're going to make mistakes, and maybe you give into a compulsion. That's okay. That's not the end of the world. That's not, it doesn't start over, from square one. You just gave into a compulsion this one time, and this next time you now hopefully won't give into that compulsion. It's all learning. I think so much of just maturing and aging is learning more about yourself, your needs, your values, and your compulsions are all a part of that. And that's, just use it as a learning process along the way.
Yeah. And I said that the one main thing, like you were saying, is like, don't be down on yourself if you give into a compulsion. If you do, even if you take steps, and be proud of the fact that you do it less times, or maybe you didn't do it quite as often, or even like 5 seconds less than you normally would, or you did one time less, turn the doorknob or whatever. Cut yourself a break, because it's enough of a struggle with OCD on a daily basis. You don't need to make it harder for yourself. So I'd say just you're going to feel bad and you're going to feel worse. Like you said, every time you give into one, or you do it, and you're going to regret doing it, but try not to. Just try to focus on, you're recognizing it and you're trying to get better at it. And it's a process, and you're going to have to keep working at it. And just where you can, just, pat yourself on the back and be like, hey, at least I'm trying to do this. Because otherwise it's going to set you back even more if you just keep getting down on yourself for when you give in. Heck, I give in every once in a while too. I'll find myself and I'm like, like it's going to happen. Just, it doesn't mean you're starting from square one, like you were saying. Just, pick yourself up and keep going. It's okay. So be kind on yourself, because at least if no one else, well, at least you can be kind on yourself. If you can. It's like, so don't beat yourself up over it.
And I think, like you said, is, having OCD is hard enough. You don't need to also add to that by being, hurtful, hateful to yourself. I mean, you are learning. Okay. So a couple people actually asked, I think it's, never mind, it's the same person. How do I stop being easily irritable and take everything so seriously? I have explosive anger, or OCD. And they also asked a little bit ago about getting so mad over nothing, easily irritable. What do you think?
Well, I'd say it sounds a lot like the ROCD is really spiking up and causing issues for you. And the anxiety, I'm sure, is really through the roof, and I'm sure it's not helping. And if you have anything like ADHD or something with that, it'll cause your anger to come out like this. I know that's one thing I have. It could snap really quick, which helps the OCD like really go bad quick. I'd say stop. It's trying to accept it, and trying to, as much as I said, it's a cop out. You have to kind of sit with it and try to pause, and just not as easy. It sounds easier than it is, but try not to get wrapped up. And it's not ruminating, but just let the thought go. Don't focus on it, and don't snap quick at it. And that's more of, in my opinion, that's more of like a ADD thing, is the quick snap judgment, because it wants to go like that. And you have to just like kind of put like an artificial buffer in there before you act. But if it's really focusing on the ROCD thoughts you're having, like this part, like either you're not good enough, or they're not good enough, or they're cheating on you, or whatever, however it's manifesting in yourself, it's try not to dwell or let those thoughts control you, because if it's the thoughts you're coming out and they're getting so built up in your head and like a pressure cooker that you're just spitting out the thoughts because they're all in there and you got to get them out. I mean, a lot of them may be, they're just intrusive thoughts. And if you're just vocalizing them all, it doesn't make them more real or anything. It's just causing yourself more pain or your partner more pain. And you probably, because you're regretting spitting it out and you're like, well, I didn't mean to do that. It just was an intrusive thought that I vocalized. It's more of just try not to act, let the thoughts go in and out. And I don't know if that would help not say them, but if you let them go in and out, then they won't stay in there enough for you to project them out at your partner. If that helps at all, I would say try not to pay mind to them. Just try to let all the thoughts you're having, if you can let them enter the freeway and exit and not bother you, and realize they're just thoughts and you're just going to have them and they happen all the time. And the more you think about them, the more real they'll seem to you. But if you let them go in and out quick, then you won't feel the need to act on them because they won't sit there and bounce around and build up pressure until you explode. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, Molly.
Yeah, it made sense to me. Yeah, I think, like the thoughts, the irritability is not, or I guess I should say the anger is not necessarily the problem. It's, what you are doing with that. And so I think, labeling the emotion, say, just being open, saying I'm angry right now. And that's okay. It's okay to be angry. That's not, anger is not a problem. It's the response to that anger. But my go-to always is be open with your partner. Tell them, I'm irritable right now. I don't know why. This is just how I'm feeling. I think that's kind of always a good step.
Yeah.
So I don't see any other questions. Oh, here's a couple more. How can I deal with superstitious OCD and avoiding bad numbers and words?
It'd be more at the, well, I used to try to, as a kid, have to, number 13, superstitious, try to avoid that. And I don't know if it wasn't really ERP, but I would start like making myself put that in there when I was a kid. I didn't know what I was doing. I would just do that to prove that, which again, granted, could lead to reassurance or something, but I would hit it and say, okay, let's see what happens. And the elevator inevitably would stop and there'd be a floor and nothing would happen. So I would say it's like any other OCD, do some exposures to try to see what if something could happen or not happen. It's the fact that you have to live with there's no black and white here. It's not going to be, there's bad numbers of words or good numbers in words. Just try to expose yourself to them and say, okay, is this going to be, write down the number, whatever you think is an unlucky number for you or something, write it down on a piece of paper. Did anything happen? More than likely, probably not. Unless you have like a magical crayon or something that causes things to happen. But I would say just try to do a response, like put it out there, try to make yourself have to just sit with whatever it takes, a number, or typing in that number. Maybe you don't like typing it in, you don't like seeing it, you don't like walking that number of steps, or I don't know, having that number on like a certain card you don't like putting out or whatever it is. Put it out there in front of you and just sit with it and just make it anxious at first, and then anxiety will probably get worse the first time you do it, but maybe next time you do it, it's like, okay, and then I have 4 clubs in front of me. It's not bothering me as much this time. And maybe it'll start getting better over time, but it's the exposures to it, and try to, whether something happens or not, you just have to be like, okay, maybe it will, maybe this is a bad number. Maybe something good will happen today or not. Just teach yourself that it's not the number itself. It's really the OCD causing it. It's not the number causing it. ERP. That's the thing I could say, is just try to expose yourself to it and let's see what happens. Like either it happens or it doesn't. And then you won't really focus on those numbers anymore, because nothing would have happened, or maybe it did. And it's just at the end of the day, it's just a number.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, or you alluded to at least, is that the exposure is not to prove that nothing bad will happen or can happen. It's to prove, well, it's not to prove, it's to kind of show yourself that you can handle it, that you can write that number or say that number out loud or take that number of steps, whatever it is, and deal with whatever consequence happens. Because I know a lot of times exposures can kind of become compulsive in that way, that it's like, well, I did it and I showed myself that nothing bad happened, therefore, I'm better. And that's not necessarily the goal. The goal is to allow that, accept the fact that something bad might happen, and you can still do the thing, whatever the thing is that you are avoiding or doing. I think you said everything really well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think, just exposing yourself to it, start small, maybe write it, type it on your phone, so you don't have to write it first. Count that many whatevers in the morning. It's late. I'm blanking on specific things, but I think, just exposing yourself to that number in any way that you can, and just kind of go from there.
Yeah, and take more of that it won't have that importance for you anymore, that hanging over your head, that number would just be another number or letter or word, phrase, whatever you have, because if you run into it again, you can handle what happens, whether something happens or not. It's just a word, phrase, or number.
Yeah, I've heard a lot. I've heard a lot of it with like the word like cancer or a certain illness that people will say, that like even just saying the word makes them think they're more likely to get that disease, or illness or whatever it is. And so I would say, in that case, watch TV shows that talk about it. Google that word on YouTube so that you just hear somebody saying it over and over. Just exposing yourself and then eventually working your way up to saying the word yourself. I mean, that's kind of the goal, is to be able to say it freely, and in conversation. So I'd say, the fact that you're aware of it is already a big step. And then just do exposure.
Yeah. I mean, ERP is really what it's all about. I mean, that is the one thing that definitely helps, that can lessen the effects, is once you start doing ERP. But until you start it, then it's not gonna magically go away. You can try to not think about it much, or try to having to deal with that situation head on and be like, well, I can take whatever happens, and not having to know beforehand X or Y is going to happen. It's just, all right, something is going to happen, but I'll deal with whatever it is. Like I can handle it and move on, and I'm still here. That's the main thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Can our OCD change who you are and your personality? So, I mean, I think in general, OCD, because when somebody says our OCD, yes, of course, different themes are different and they impact our lives differently, but at the end of the day, it's OCD. So I would say that OCD can not necessarily change your personality, but it can give you a different view through which to view the world, a different viewpoint. I know myself, I think having OCD makes me more empathetic and understanding to other people who are going through struggles, because I know what it's like to go through a struggle. I don't know if that necessarily, I don't think it can change your personality. I think it can add to your personality and give you different ways to view the world. I don't know, Brian, if you think.
Well, I was going to say, I could see if the OCD is causing you a lot of anxiety, I could see that not really more of affecting your personality, because now it's causing you stress and you haven't really had that stressor before. So maybe that is causing you to feel different. I mean, the OCD is not you, and that's tough to say, but like the thoughts and what it makes, the way you act, your compulsions, your whatever you ruminate on, it's not your obsessions. They're not you. It's kind of like, I like to think of it as, it's kind of like your intrusive thoughts are like random dreams that you're having, like you're not controlling, they're just popping into your head. And if they're, especially if you're not used to it, or you haven't done ERP and it's a new kind of OCD maybe, or something that you've had, if the anxiety is building up, I could see it maybe affecting, especially like you were saying before, that it's, you have an anger OCD and it's causing you to lash out. I would say it's probably the anxiety from your OCD that's building up and causing you to release the thoughts, you know, put them into actions or words, and you're verbally letting them out because your anxiety is building up. And it could be something else that's causing the OCD to cause the anxiety to build up. I said the main thing is getting to whatever the root cause of that's causing me. That our OCD, it may be just part of it. There may be something else that's causing a lot more anxiety that's making our OCD worse, which is giving you more anxiety. If that makes any sense. It's not, you're still you in there, but it's when the OCD has really got you wrapped around the axles and the anxiety is going, you might start acting a little bit, I will say acting a little bit different than you would, just because if you've been stressed all the time, stress will make you act a lot more, as it sounds like in this, a lot uncharacteristic. It's not yourself. You're frustrated and the anxiety is really building up. And I think that could be, it's kind of, I think that could be, if you're feeling like a different person, it's the anxiety caused by the ROCD or vice versa. It's acting up and just really wearing on you. And I think that if you can start getting the ROCD under control, if that is the main thing, the main issue, or whatever other OCD, and I think that could help start to relieve it, and give you some relief.
Yeah. I'm going to let you take that one, because I know you've talked about having depression as well. Can OCD cause depression? I think I'm struggling with both.
I think they all, I mean, there's the fact that the comorbidity of many of like anxiety and depression with OCD or ADHD with OCD, it's like there's always, it seems like there's one cause of the other. But I originally got diagnosed for anxiety and depression, and they didn't pick up on the OCD because they weren't OCD. That's not their specialty. So they didn't really pick it up on it at first, even though they gave us their standard test, but partially because I didn't understand the questions, like intrusive thought. They didn't explain what that was, nor could they really tell me. But I told them that the patterns that I exhibited and the symptoms, I was like, I'm pretty sure I have it, not to self-diagnose, but they didn't pick up on it. But I would say there's a good chance, because if you have it, you'll tend to doubt and, you know, beat yourself up over it, and be hard on yourself. And I think there could be a link between them, but I'd say just any of them having any of the anxiety usually feeds depression, OCD feeds depression. It seems like they always kind of feed each other when your mind is acting in a different way than what others around you, or they don't understand, especially when they don't understand what's going on. And it's something you've had your entire life and no one really understood, or you felt alone or something. I definitely had depression from that, because it was used to being taunted, especially, like I said, like these are my exes and stuff that would make fun of me for it. And just, there was no sympathy or anything. It was just, you know, what's wrong with you? Why can't you just not do that? And so, yeah, that definitely, for me, definitely caused it, because I thought I was broken and was not told otherwise and was pretty much ridiculed. You know, that, I think for me, it definitely did cause it. So I think it can, especially if you feel alone, which you're not, obviously. And if you're here, then you definitely, you know, hopefully you know that you're not alone. Others are feeling the same way. But yeah, I think it definitely can, because you're trying to, especially if you're stuck in your thoughts a lot, and if you're trying to ruminate on stuff over and over again, you'll make yourself feel worse. Like, why can't I break out of this cycle? Or what's wrong with me for doing that? If you start going down that rabbit hole, then yeah, I think it could definitely help cause it.
Yeah.
But is there anything else you wanted to?
Yeah, no, I think you said that really well. I think it is, the comorbidity is definitely there, you know, for so many people, between anxiety, OCD, depression, ADHD, like you said, there's, you know, all the acronyms. And I think that we don't necessarily even need to know which one causes it or what causes it. Just, the fact that you have both of them matters, and you can treat them separately. You can kind of treat them together depending on the therapist. And I think that, OCD in itself is traumatic. Having OCD is in my opinion, is a form of trauma. It's not, the typical what people think of when they think of trauma, but those images that we get and the way that we respond to them and the way that our brain beats ourselves up when when we are engaging in the compulsions, like that is trauma. And that can lead to depression, which came first, the chicken or the egg type thing. And yeah, I mean, like you said, you're not alone. There are so many people that are here, obviously asking questions, and just in general that have OCD and that have depression, that have anxiety. And yeah, I mean, reach out to a therapist if you're able to, get a support group, get a support system.
That's one of the main things about OCD is, especially if you're just ruminating your thoughts and not really showing outward compulsions, that's one of the hardest things for them to diagnose, because you're not showing it on the outside. You're just in your head checking over and over and over again. And it's not that you exhibit it and anyone would pick up on it unless you actually start talking to a therapist or start talking to someone about it. That's rough, because that's something you're suffering in your head and no one else knows about it. That's not, it's one thing if like people see you doing something, but that's the one thing about OCD. It's a lot of times it's hidden and people don't understand all the stuff going on in our heads that we have to deal with. It's just, it's one of those things that you like silent suffering, for lack of a better term. It's a bully that's beating us up on the inside, and most people don't know and they don't understand. So yeah, it's get help or, reach out. You're not alone, and don't suffer in silence, I guess is a way to put it. It's because that's the worst thing, is just trying to think, well, I'll just take care of it myself, or just ignore it, because it's not going to ignore it. You'll just keep thinking about it more and more, and it'll just get worse.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, I think that is it. It is 9:00. So thank you all, as always, for the questions, for being here, for being open and asking these things, that you're wondering. There are these every day throughout the week. So check back tomorrow. Actually, I don't know if they're on Fridays, but check the app.
I mean, it should be Mondays that we're on.
Yeah, right. Check the app, the OCD app. You can download it on any device that has, that you can download things on. There are support groups on there for free. There's a forum on there. And then you obviously can get therapy through OCD with a licensed clinician. It was so fun as always, Brian. Did you have any wonderful parting words?
I will say, just like Molly was saying, OCD, go make the free call just to get the free diagnosis. It only takes like 15 minutes or so, if I remember. But do your research. All the webinars are up. You can find past ones to go. Get the app. I'm pretty sure you can download it on a toaster now. Like all the different formats, you can get it. It's good because whether you even just read other people's posts or post yourself, you can find the groups that Molly was talking about before, and just education is the big part of it. And just when you start seeing the people have had experiences with similar things that you didn't think anyone else did, you realize you're not alone. So you don't have to be scared about saying anything to a therapist, and talking to a therapist, especially to try to dig into what types you have or subtypes. Just be honest with them. And no matter how much you think they would have you have some crazy thing they've never heard before, they have heard everything. And they have heard much more than you could probably ever think of. So don't be afraid to tell them, because they've heard it all. And you're not going to shock them at all. They won't even skip a beat. They're like, that's my experience. They're like, no, that's not shocking at all. But just remember, you're not alone. And don't be afraid to reach out and take the first steps. I highly encourage you to take those steps. Don't let it get worse, or don't let it pull you down, and just try to enjoy life, because that's what we're here for. There's no reboot button as far as I know. So you got one chance to get it right. And I want to thank Molly, as always, for having me on. And yeah, we need to come up with a name whenever we do, besides like the analogy show. Which, although we did go up more this time than last time. I think last time we didn't have too many.
Yeah.
Maybe, but, you know, we'll aim. I need to start keeping track of how many analogies we go. But yeah, NoCD, highly recommend checking out. It has helped me tremendously since it's been a big turnaround, I will say, from March myself. So, man, I've had it all my life. So, I mean, some people have it worse than others, and everyone's got their unique situation. But ERP is the key to all OCD, I guess, really.
Yeah.
In my experience, anyway, that's what it is. And don't be afraid to reach for help. Just take one step at a time. And I'll turn it back over to Mollie.
Could not have said it better myself. Yeah, you guys are wonderful for being here, for asking your questions. You're so far from alone in what you're going through. And that's all. Yeah. Thank you for being here. And we will maybe see you again.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.